And so the decisions being made are being made based on information that is out today, out tomorrow, and waiting until 3 days before the election to finally take action is useless. But we also have to understand that it's not simply about bad information about the elections themselves, it's about the issues that are driving those elections. So misinformation about protest, misinformation about climate action and climate denialism, misinformation about criminal justice reform, about police brutality. Those issues have to be met in this moment with accurate information. We must hold social media platforms responsible because they are the single most effective conduit of information to some of the most vulnerable and least resilient voices in our democracy. Because communities that are often new to the process turn to social media for their information, misinformation has the death knell effect on their actual and active participation in our democracy. From the benign or seemingly benign notion of giving wrong dates and wrong links to the more aggressive misinformation that lies and manipulates and tells people untruths about who they are and what they're permitted to do.
But the predominant concern that I have in terms of election interference and meddling is still Russia. And there are new and even deeper fault lines for them to play upon. The pandemic is, I think, the fault line of all fault lines. But in terms of the Russians' capacity to cause Americans to distrust their own democracy, there's probably no more fertile ground than the ground that our president has ceded. This gets to a point that Sasha was making, and that ground being whether the votes of millions and millions of Americans who cast their vote by absentee ballot can be discredited. And this foundation that the president is laying, and now the Attorney General, our own Attorney General, has given further seed to, is really an open invitation for malignant powers to exploit, to amplify this false message that you can't rely on votes cast by absentee. And if we have a close election, the doubt that a foreign hostile power can create by amplifying that false message could be quite disastrous. But in terms of the focus on social media, in 2016, the Russians had a few objectives. Yes, they wanted to help Donald Trump and they wanted to hurt Hillary Clinton, but more broadly, they wanted to divide our society along well-known fault lines of race, ethnicity, orientation, immigration status, Second Amendment rights. But they also wanted to cause Americans to distrust their own democracy. And this remains, I think, a central objective as we go into the 2020 elections of foreign powers, but particularly Russia. We may see other bad actors involved. We may see the Iranians. We may see rival powers like China and North Korea and others. It's not just foreign bad actors we need to be concerned about. It is also domestic bad actors. Ask Facebook, where among the priorities in their algorithm do they place amplification of engagement? That is the content that is able to titillate or anger or create fear among its users, the potential for virality. Where do they place that among their priorities? Is that their top priority? Is that their last priority? Where does truth fit in that hierarchy of values that is exemplified by the algorithm? The answer, it won't surprise you, is I can't tell you. Now, I'll have to get back to you.
In 2016, I told Americans that keep track of what's happening to us, because what's happening in the Philippines is your dystopian future. And fast forward 4 years, and I'll quickly go through that through my lenses and then through what's happening to you. In 2016, the messages were seeded on social media first. President Duterte won in May of 2016. The drug war began soon after he took office. The weaponization of social media began soon after that, by July of 2016. The message, at least in our case, was journalist equals criminal. That was seeded in 2016, exponentially pounded when we came out with challenges to the impunity in a brutal drug war, to the impunity of information operations or influence operations, we were pounded. I think keep in mind this one thing, that the goal of information operations or influence operations is not just to flood you with lies, but also to target people, to target their minds, what they're thinking, and to change the way they behave.
We are driven in hordes, inorganically, into these more and more polarized environments. That, to some extent, accounted for the massive proliferation of hate and extremist content online. The real challenge is that we have plenty of anecdotal evidence, but nobody has access, except for the platforms, to the data in order to be able to verify what the algorithmic outcome is, in fact, in relation to these harms. We desperately need third-party review of the systems and real robust transparency.
Canada's experience is that it takes a whole of government and a whole of society effort to effectively combat disinformation. The strongest defense against threats to democracy is obviously an engaged and informed citizenry, and therefore a resilient public. Indeed, citizens, in our view, can be, with the right tools and awareness, the best bulwark against disinformation.
Disinformation not only impacts, but in fact targets the Black organizing community and threatens the public discourse. International actors are, in increasing numbers, centering racial injustice and deliberately stoking the flames of discord in this country. And this is no accident. In 2016, our organizers were among the first to notice international accounts that were uncharacteristic to our movement and posed a threat to our mission. Since then, we have worked to build the right structure, support, and technological tools needed to monitor, analyze, report, and take action. During the recent protests in this country, suspicious Facebook events were created in our name by groups other than BLM chapters. Material created to incite racial tension was distributed in our name and amplified across Facebook and YouTube's platforms. It's crucial at this time that we help our leaders, our lawmakers, and business leaders understand the impact of disinformation on the work of Black liberation, that our messages are being co-opted and misappropriated by international actors attempting to cause chaos and disorientation. Recently and disturbingly, during the 2020 primaries, we have seen attempts again and again to suppress the power of our vote with disinformation. These tactics range from direct voter disinformation on polling place closing times and intentionally wrong information about how to vote, to content clearly trying to intimidate voters and not to vote by using scare tactics. And as dangerous as many of these are, we also see disinformation trying to feed the notion and dissuade our community that voting just doesn't matter. These are all deliberate and insidious efforts to silence our voices where they matter most.
In the community, we have seen all the elements of misinformation in the past. For example, the wrong dates in Spanish to go to vote, etc. But now we have seen an explosion of misinformation that is really affecting a lot of people.